Hi, I wanted to do an update to my video regarding building a web automation framework in less than 15 minutes. I've gotten a few questions and I wanted to cover a few ideas and concepts. First, one of the questions that keeps coming up from different people has been that when they try to do my video word for word, and they write the exact same code that was in the original video, that it wasn't working. And the reason for that is that Amazon and every other website out there is going to change their code base from time to time. And so part of being a web automation person on a team is that you will have access to those changes when your team makes changes. That's part of your job. But we're doing a test, and we're testing with a site that isn't under our control. So they're going to make changes. So Amazon will make changes to their div tags and their IDs. The original Amazon site did not look, well, not the original. When I did the video, Amazon didn't look the way it does today. Today it has this different feel, there's different JavaScript running, and all the divs are different. In fact, in the original video, when I basically was looking into this section of the page, there was in fact, it just crashed my Firefox. There was basically a div named there were these divs that had these unique names based upon the results that were being returned. And I was using that div to just quickly say, here's an example of what you can do to find something on the page. Well, those divs are no longer there. Instead, they've been replaced with LIs. So, we have these. See these LIs? So these IDs, result 0, 1, 2, 3, those used to be divs. Now they are LI tags that are within this div here, which is your ATF results. Now the funny thing about that div, I'm pretty sure I didn't see that before, and I've seen it sometimes. Sometimes websites will also do A/B testing, and this is a concept that as a QA tester you learn, which is where a website will put up two different versions of their site, and randomly they'll select different users to see different versions, and they're testing which layout or what functionality seems more useful to the different users. So sometimes you'll see tags, and then the next time they'll be gone. You won't have that. You won't have as many of those problems when you work on a team. But for me to come up with an example of something to test that's a little more work than just going to Google and searching for something, it can, those things will come up. So part of getting into QA automation is that you need to think around the problems you're going to come across. And so this is a problem where the div tag changed. Somebody mentioned that, and there were some other questions on the actual page itself. So, and I'll show you the code now. Another question, comment that was raised was that it looked like people couldn't see that well or something. I'm going to try to, I don't know if I can actually zoom within RubyMine, but I am going to show you some things I've added. Okay, so let's go through, let's start from the test level. So here's the Amazon feature. As you should know, this is a Cucumber test, and I have two examples here. These are the original examples I did real quick, which was a default scenario and a scenario outline. And let's just to recap what Cucumber does. Cucumber is a BDD framework, and that stands for behavior driven development. And the idea here is that we work on tests that break down the actual behavior of the user or of the functionality. So in this case, everything will have a given, a when, and a then. The given is always a statement of the precondition. So in this case, it's given a user is at Amazon. The when is when they are testing a piece of functionality, when they search for pens. The then is when we say this is the conclusion, this is the result we expect. Then Amazon should return results for pens. And you'll notice that in my IDE, the word pens is in blue. This is something special in Cucumber. When you put something in quotes, it becomes a variable. And so if we change that from pins to, say, gems, it would now search for gems. And you can see that in the code. Let's go ahead and get to the code. Let's look at the given first. I want to go through each step by step. Now, how can I zoom in here? Is there a way? So I know somebody said it was hard to read this on their... there we go. It's a little too much, huh? Okay. So I hope that helps. It says, given a use... Now notice how that step is... Let me go back. This was another question. The user said, how does this text of the test correlate to the actual functionality of the browser automation? Cucumber uses something called regex, and that's regular expression, and it's a way of text matching and manipulation. So Cucumber knows that it's set up so that anything that follows after the given, this line right here, is going to match somewhere inside your step file. The step file is over here. I don't know if I can zoom into that either. Can't really zoom on the left side, but the step file is over here, and you can create it manually, or you can do it within your IDE if your IDE does like step generation. RubyMine does. Some IDEs don't. But if your IDE does, it can generate this file for you. Otherwise, you write it by hand. And when you go into that file, you'll see that you have it like this: given, and then there is this slash, and then the caret. A user goes to Amazon, $ slash. What this is saying is between this slash and this slash is some text matching we're going to do. And we're going to start here, and we're going to end here, where the $ is. So you'll see it says that's how it links this test to this statement. Now, the next line is really setting up the browser. A lot of your examples online will do this. They'll be like, so you set a variable, at browser, go to. There'll be something like this. They would do something like at browser. They would do something like browser equals water, and you would see something like that, right? The reason I'm using at browser makes it a class variable, and the reason I do that is that each of these given when thens, if you know a little bit about Ruby, you'll notice they really look like methods. And in order to get, if I defined the browser, or I had a defined variable in this step, it wouldn't be accessible by any other step. If I defined browser without being a class variable like that, it wouldn't be accessible anywhere else. But saying that, you might wonder, well, where are you defining the browser? I don't define the browser in the test anymore. I define it in another file, which I'm going to get to later, but it's like a precondition. It's like a file that's loaded before the tests are run. And I use that to set up the browser. and it lets me dynamically pass in a browser. This is useful later because then you can just say Cucumber run test, and then you just specify the browser, and then it can run it in a variety of browsers. So anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So I'm basically saying this variable that was defined at browser, go to this website. And then we go to the next step, which is when they search for gems. So now I had the RubyMine auto-generate this for me. You could write the regex different ways, but you'll notice this piece. I really don't want to write my own regex, so I let RubyMine write it for me. But you could write this regex a little bit different, and it would still work. The idea here is you can see everything is clear up until this point. And what they're doing here is they're saying, I'm going to pass in a variable. And this variable could be letters, numbers, could be anything. And we're going to name that variable arg. Okay? You could call it something else, you could call it parameter or whatever you want. But then what you do is that in here, you are saying, browser, go to the text field with this ID, and .set is a it's a water method to actually type characters, and we're going to type arg. So we're saying whatever is in these quotes, pass it in here as the word arg. So if that's gems, gems is now associated as the variable arg, and we're passing in the word gems right here where arg is. If you're not, you need to have some familiarity with Ruby because you'll need to understand what this is. This is like, if you're familiar with Groovy, it would be like a G string. It's basically you're passing in a variable into a string. It's very useful. Anyway, and then you'll notice down here I'm doing send keys :return. What that does, it's like the user's pressing a key. I did that instead of clicking a button, but you could click a button if you wanted to. This is just all examples. This is not like the be-all, end-all of a test. Then you'll see I go on to the next step, which is here. Then Amazon should return, so this is our verification step. Amazon should return results for, and again we have that variable captured. And this is where we had some trouble. This used to be a div, and the div no longer exists on Amazon. Here's another aspect, is the symbol, this :ID. You don't want to do this, because then Ruby and Cucumber are going to say, that's a variable, and you're trying to give some assignment, and I don't understand this. It has to understand this is a symbol. So ID means something to water, and that's why you got to have it in that way. And you have basically this rocket parameter, and we're saying where ID is this results _2, wait until present. So I'm saying, okay, browser, load that page, but it may load slow, so let's wait until the second result has loaded. Okay, now let's go ahead and do now look at this is different. Assert _it, verified Amazon results, and then over here we got browser text include arg. Now you might say, well, why don't I use assertions? I changed my Ruby version and assertions broke, and I spent too much time trying to get the test library assertions working, and I was digging around and I saw that I forget his name right now, but the guy who invented Water, he basically wrote his own assertion method. I modified it a little bit. Basically I used his and I put it in my env file. I guess now's a good time to go to the env file. So I told you that I defined the browser outside of the tests now, and I also have this new assertion going on. But right before I go there, why don't I just say this line. Browser.text.include, passing in the argument. Why don't I just have this as the then? It's something about Cucumber that if you don't assert in that then statement, pretty much everything you pass in there is going to pass. So if I said browser text include, quote, my name, Brian Warner, and it's not on the page at all, it will pass. I don't know why it passes. It's not, maybe it's treating the actual statement as, is it syntactically correct? I don't know, but it's not actually testing it on the page. And so if you actually set it to a variable, like a equals this line here, and then you do like puts a, you'll see it comes back false. But if for whatever reason the then won't capture it. So I had to do an assertion. But I wrote my own assertion. So let's look at it. Here is my env file. In this file, I have set the requirements, require Watir-Webdriver, require Cucumber. Now I have, what that does is I don't have to put those in each individual step file. So this env file, which let me actually explain, under the features folder, you create a folder called support, you create a file called env.rb. Once you've done that, what Cucumber will do, it will look here first, and any file that's in support, it will kick it off before the test is run. So in this case it says, okay, I'm going to fire this off first, and what does it do? It calls Watir-Webdriver and Cucumber. So in a way this is like inheritance, if that makes sense for you. We're sort of doing it in a roundabout way with Cucumber. Then Cucumber says, okay, and then I say in Cucumber, let's go ahead and set a browser name. It's going to be a variable. And so on the command line, if we were to run the command cucumber space home dot Amazon search feature, and then we were to do something like let me quit this. I keep getting email notifies. And then we were to do something like pass in a variable like Chrome, IE, Firefox. It would kick off the appropriate browser. That's useful when we get this into a more advanced stage where we're doing something where our tests are kicked off in Jenkins. And then you can have the tests programmatically kicking off with the different browsers. So you could have like a Jenkins project that says run all my tests in IE, run all my tests in Firefox. And all you have to do is really change a command line parameter. It's just cucumber browser equals IE. So that's how I'm doing this. This env and then browser. What this is saying is I'm creating an environment variable called uppercase browser. And I'm setting it in the two pipes equals. It sets like a default parameter. By default, if nothing is passed in, we run Firefox. You'll notice it says downcase, and then I got toSim. That's in case a user typed in all uppercase, or if they had capital F, it will lower it down to Firefox. toSim makes it a symbol. How does that make sense? Well, I'll show you. If we come down, in fact, I'll try to zoom in just like I did before. Sorry, I didn't do that a minute ago. So here's the code. We got our requirements. We have our browser name defined. It's going to become now, if we look right here, look at this line. So now I'm saying at browser equals, or a class variable browser equals water browser new browser name. And browser name is coming back in from the command line, or it will default to Firefox. Downcase to sim. Remember when you set a browser, it actually, I'm going to comment this out, it actually comes in like this. Right? So you're doing that by simply making it a symbol. So it passes it in correctly. That's all. I also have an environment variable. I use this a lot at work. I don't use it in the I don't know if I really showed this in my actual original video, But at work I use environment variables because I have multiple environments. I have a Selenium Grid set up so that I pass all my tests in to a Selenium server, and it executes them all in parallel. What that means is if I had 20 different Cucumber features, I can run all of them simultaneously, and they go to a server, a Selenium server, and it farms out all the different feature tests to different virtual machines running different browsers. I'll get into that in another future video because it's more of an advanced topic. But for now, just know that here's a precursor to it. I have a optional environment variable that can be passed on the command line, and it defaults to prod. And so what is prod? Well, that's what we were just looking at. Prod is this. Else if environment is prod, then set the browser to browser name. But you'll notice if I did if environment is local, then I would go to localhost. This is just an example, like, to show you that, hey, this can actually, if I were to set my environment to local, then something else would happen. Of course, this would fail because I'm not running Amazon on my local, but it's just an example of how you can guide the user. And you'll see I had another environment here called int, and I said, this is totally an example. It said, we'll create the browser, and then we're going to go to sandboxamazon.com, and we're going to log in. None of this is real, okay? These are fake usernames, fake passwords. There is no sandbox.amazon.com. This is examples if you had an internal development place. So maybe you have an internal development box called integration. So then if you pass in environment equals int, it would send you there, Anyway, that's pretty much how that works. Now we get down to the assertions. Assert it. Okay, I called it assert underscore it just to be clear. I'm not using the test assertions that are in the test library. I got this block from the guy who invented Water, and I think he had a site called Watermelon or Firewater. One of those sites I found this block, and he said just write your own assertions. And here's how he did it. He did everything here except this and this. And these are important because without them, the test will never fail. They will always pass. Even if they fail, Cucumber will mark it as a pass. So let's go through it. You're taking a message and a block, and here's how it works. If it passes, if it meets the criteria, then I'm just going to put out there, okay, it passed, and pass in the message that Cucumber says. But if it fails, we're going to pass in this test failure on assertion. So let's go back. Let's look at how the assertions are getting passed back. Assert it, so I'm calling that variable, I'm calling that method, and I'm saying this is the message, right? This is the message, and this is saying verified Amazon results. I could say verified, gems was visible in the results page, right? And then you would have this line is the block. And that's pretty much it. So that pretty much covers everything here. My son's waking up, so I've got to take care of him. But I've put all this code up on GitHub, and I'll put it into the link in the description of this video. I hope that's a little more helpful. You can use my skeleton up on GitHub. It really doesn't take a lot of time and effort to build this. It's like 10-15 minutes, maybe even less than that once you get used to it. I also had set up examples of taking screenshots where if something failed or didn't fail, I had a condition. This is a screenshot it took. So you can see that I have that as well, and you can look at that code if it's useful for you. I used to think screenshots were really cool, and then I got over it, so I don't use it much anymore. In the next video, I'm going to work on advanced topics like setting this up in Jenkins and setting up Selenium Server 2 to handle simultaneous parallel tests being run. So I hope this is useful, and let me know if you have any questions.